Good evening and welcome back to another episode of The Longing, where today we will be continuing to read The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. So, let's get going. He wanted to know how long she had been at Misselthwaite. He wanted to know which corridor her room was on. He wanted to know what she had been doing, if she disliked the moor as he disliked it, where she had lived before she came to Yorkshire. She answered all these questions and many more, and he lay back on his pillow and listened. He made her tell him a great deal about India and her voyage across the ocean. She found out that, because he had been an invalid, he had not learned things as other children had. One of his nurses had taught him to read when he was quite little, and he was always reading and looking at pictures in splendid books. Though his father rarely saw him when he was awake, he was given all sorts of wonderful things to amuse himself with. He never seemed to have been amused, however. He could have anything he asked for, and was never made to do anything he did not like to do. "Everyone is obliged to do what pleases me," he said, indifferently. "It makes me ill to be angry. No one believes I shall live to grow up." He said it as if he was so accustomed to the idea that it had ceased to matter to him at all. He seemed to like the sound of Mary's voice. As she went on talking, he listened in a drowsy, interested way. Once or twice she wondered if he were not gradually falling into a doze, but at last he asked a question which opened up a new subject. "How old are you?" he asked. "I am 10, answered Mary, forgetting herself for the moment. "And so are you." "How do you know that?" he demanded in a surprised voice. "Because when you were born the garden door was locked and the key was buried, and it has been locked for 10 years. Colin half sat up, turning toward her, leaning on his elbows. "What garden door was locked? Who did it? Where was the key buried?" he exclaimed as if he was suddenly very much interested. It was the garden Mr. Craven hates," said Mary nervously. "He locked the door. No one knew where he buried the key." "What sort of a garden is it?" Colin persisted eagerly. "No one has been allowed to go into it for 10 years, was Mary's careful answer. But it was too late to be careful. He was too much like herself. He too had nothing to think about, and the idea of a hidden garden attracted him as it had attracted her. He asked question after question. Where was it? Had she never looked for the door? Had she never asked the gardeners? "They won't talk about it," said Mary. "I think they have been told not to answer questions." "I would make them," said Colin. "Could you?" Mary faltered, beginning to feel frightened. "If you could make people answer questions, who knew what might happen?" "Everyone is obliged to please me. I told you that," he said. "If I were to live, this place would some time belong to me. They all know that. I would make them tell me." Mary had not known that she herself had been spoiled, but she could see quite plainly that this mysterious boy had been. He thought that the whole world belonged to him. How peculiar he was, and how coolly he spoke of not living. "Do you think you won't live?" she asked, partly because she was curious, and partly in hope of making him forget the garden. "I don't suppose I shall," he answered as indifferently as he had spoken before. "Ever since I remember anything, I have heard people say I shan't. At first they thought I was too little to understand, and now they think I don't hear. But I do. My doctor is my father's cousin. He is quite poor, and if I die, he will have all Misselthwaite when my father is dead. I should think he wouldn't want me to live." "Do you want to live?" inquired Mary. "No," he answered in a cross, tired fashion. "But I don't want to die. When I feel ill, I lie here and think about it until I cry and cry." "I have heard you crying 3 times, Mary said, "but I did not know who it was. Were you crying about that?" She did so want him to forget the garden. "I dare say," he answered. "Let us talk about something else. Talk about that garden. Don't you want to see it?" "Yes," answered Mary, in quite a low voice. "I do," he went on persistently. "I don't think I've ever really wanted to see anything before, but I want to see that garden. I want the key dug up. I want the door unlocked. I would let them take me there in my chair. That would be getting fresh air. I am going to make them open the door." He had become quite excited, and his strange eyes began to shine like stars, and looked more immense than ever. "They have to please me," he said. "I will make them take me there, and I will let you go too." Mary's hands clutched each other. Everything would be spoiled. Everything. Dickon would never come back. She would never again feel like a missel thrush with a safe hidden nest. "Oh, don't do that," she cried out. He stared as if he thought she had gone crazy. "Why?" he exclaimed. "You said you wanted to see it." "I do," she answered, almost with a sob in her throat. "But if you make them open the door and take you in like that, it will never be a secret again." He leaned still farther forward. "A secret," he said. "What do you mean? Tell me." Mary's words almost tumbled over one another. You see, she panted. "If no one knows but ourselves, if there was a door hidden somewhere under the ivy, if there was, and we could find it, and if we could slip through it together and shut it behind us, and no one knew anyone was inside, and we called it our garden and pretended that we were missel thrushes, and it was alive." "Is it dead?" he interrupted her. "It soon will be if no one cares for it," she went on. "The bulbs will live, but the roses—" He stopped her again, as excited as she was herself. "What are bulbs?" he put in quickly. "They are daffodils, and lilies, and snowdrops. They are working in the earth now, pushing up pale green points because the spring is coming." "Is the spring coming?" he said. "What is it like? You don't see it in rooms if you are ill." "It is the sun shining on the rain, and the rain falling on the sunshine, and things pushing up and working under the earth," said Mary. "If the garden was a secret, and we could get into it, we could watch the things grow bigger every day, and see how many roses are alive. Don't you see? Oh, don't you see how much nicer it would be if it was a secret?" He dropped back on his pillow, and lay there with an odd expression on his face. "I never had a secret," he said. "Except that one about not living to grow up. They don't know I know that. So it is a sort of secret. But I like this kind better." "If you won't make them take you to the garden," pleaded Mary. "Perhaps. I feel almost sure I can find out how to get in sometime. And then, if the doctor wants you to go out in your chair, and if you can always do what you want to do, perhaps we might find some boy who would push you, and we could go alone and it would always be a secret garden." "I should like that," he said very slowly, his eyes looking dreamy. "I should like that. I should not mind fresh air in a secret garden." Mary began to recover her breath and feel safer because the idea of keeping the secret seemed to please him. She almost felt sure that if she kept on talking and could make him see the garden in his mind, as she had seen it, he would like it so much that he could not bear to think that everybody might tramp into it when they chose. "I'll tell you what I think it would be like if we could go into it," she said. "It has been shut up so long, things have grown into a tangle, perhaps." He lay quite still and listened while she went on talking about the roses which might have clambered from tree to tree and hung down, and about the many birds which might have built their nests there because it was so safe. And then she told him about the robin and Ben Weatherstaff. And there was so much to tell about the robin, and it was so easy and safe to talk about it, that she ceased to be afraid. The robin pleased him so much that he smiled until he looked almost beautiful, and at first Mary had thought that he was even plainer than herself, with his big eyes and heavy locks of hair. "Well, And with that, we come to the end of the episode. So I will say thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you all have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon or night. No matter what time of day it is, I hope you all have a wonderful one of it. And as always, we will be back tomorrow for more of The Longing. Goodbye.